Hello internet users and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to once again dive into the world of weird and interesting little games. To be specific, the star of the show this time is a game called Dreaming Mary. Before we get into it though, I'm just going to give you guys a little heads up. This game is very short, so I am going to be covering everything that's in it. If at any point you'd like to try it for yourself, I'll put a link to the game's page in the description down below. With that out of the way, let's jump into a new adventure. The game begins with a bit of text. A voice is telling a girl that anything is possible within the world of dreams, and that she should search for a key hidden deep within. The voice also warns of going too deep into dreams, and that she won't be able to wake up if that happens. And from there, we're thrown into a bright pink world. Dreaming Mary is a game about a little girl named Mary, who wanders around and plays in her dreams. The gameplay is pretty standard for an adventure game. You can move around, interact with some of the environment, and can collect and use a few items. The game is also made with the RPG Maker engine, which is a bit of a surprise considering that it doesn't use the usual top-down perspective. The visuals look really good, everything is bright and colorful, and there is a distinct style to it. Despite there only being a handful of rooms to explore, the game goes all out with making them look as appealing as possible. Going back to the first room, once we're given a rundown of the controls, we are free to start looking around. This room is locked, but upon checking the bed, Mary finds a chocolate that has the key hidden inside. Once we're out into the hallway, there are a handful of doors presented to us. Inside, we get to meet a bunch of animal friends, who all seem pretty happy to see Mary. There's Benilda, the bunny maid, Gwendol, the penguin that loves books, and Fox Ann, the fox that's just hanging out at a bar. When you speak with one of them, they tell you to pay a visit to the next. After meeting Fox Ann, though, she tells you to go and see someone named Boris. In the hallway, there was a door at the very end that we previously weren't able to open. This room is definitely a little different from the others, and the character here, Boris, seems a little weird. Once we're at this point though, Boris tells Mary to go and play with the others for a while, and then come back later. When we return to the other animals, this time they each have their own little puzzles for us to solve. Benilda wants you to arrange some statues, Gwendol wants you to find certain books for him, and Fox Ann's is just a game of hide and seek within the room. Overall, the puzzles in this game are very simplistic, but they do their job just fine. After we're done and head back to Boris, he asks if we're having fun, and once again tells Mary to run off and play. Now from here, we pretty much just go and repeat what we just did. All of the other characters now have another round of puzzles for Mary, all of which are just an extension of what we did for them before. There's still no trouble at all, and you can get through them pretty quickly. Upon returning to Boris for the third time, he now wants us to go and obtain 3 seeds from our friends. Once we get them, he says that we'll be able to go deeper into the dream. At this point, you know the drill. We're just going to go back to the other animals for more puzzles. However, this is where things start to get a bit different. The characters don't seem very happy to hear that Mary is trying to get a seed from them, and attempt to persuade her against the idea. And now, the puzzles are no longer as straightforward as they were before. Previously, there was no punishment for failing, and you would just keep trying until you got it right. However, this time you only get one chance. They will each give you a seed either way, but if you don't get the correct answer, they will take away one of your flower petals. And in the case of Benilda and Fox Ann, the two of them act a little strange when this happens. For Benilda's puzzle, she asks a question about the story she's been talking about during your other encounters with her. It's possible to just guess the answer, but it's not obvious what the correct choice is. But whether you succeed or fail, Benilda will then disappear, the music will fade out, and something strange will happen to the room. In the background, you can now see a black shadow in the shape of a person continuously falling. Next, we'll go see Fox Ann. She challenges us to one final game of hide and seek, but this time the time limit is quite strict, and she no longer laughs when you get near her hiding spot, so it seems near impossible to find where she is. When the game ends, she laughs, takes your flower petal, and like with Benilda, the music begins to fade. There is also another shadow here. This one isn't as clear as the other, it flashes in and out really fast, so it's hard to get a good look at it. But if we freeze the footage on a frame where it is visible, it's certainly an eerie sight. It looks like someone is just standing there, watching Mary as she leaves. And finally, we return to Gwendol. His final puzzle feels really out of place compared to the others. He suddenly tells you that he has lost a journal. He mentions who it was written by, but wants you to tell him the name of who it was dedicated to. The journal he is talking about is not in this library, and it also isn't in any of the other rooms we visited either. There is pretty much no way you're going to be able to tell him the correct answer. However, unlike the other two characters, once you fail, instead of taunting you, he instead gives some advice. He says that the next time you enter the dream, to look for the angel. With that, he vanishes as well, leaving behind yet another shadow. You can probably see what this one is without having to pause, but it appears to be a headless body seated in his chair. And if you were paying attention, you may have also noticed that something else has been happening as we've been collecting the seeds. Each time Mary loses a petal, her expression at the top of the screen changes. It's not exactly clear what's going on at this point, but now that we have all of the seeds, I guess we head back to Boris. Though right as soon as you return to his area, you may notice something strange. Mixed with the music, you can hear a tapping noise, along with someone calling out Mary's name. Boris says that in order to get his seed, we need to give him the last flower petal. From there, we follow him into the door, and the game then gives a bit of a sinister fade-out. This is the game's normal ending, and is more than likely what most people would get in their first playthrough. From the very start, Dreaming Mary lays out exactly what it wants you to do, guiding you from room to room towards this ending. In the process of this, it teases that there is a lot of things that the player missed. This ending is also very unsatisfying and intentionally leaves you wondering what to make of it. It's a very interesting way to design a game. It gives you a road to follow, but then encourages you to step off of it and explore elsewhere. Once the credits end, a voice calls out to Mary. However, like the text in the beginning did, she is referred to as Mari here. The voice asks if we're satisfied with this fate. When you say no, you're then given another chance to start the dream over from the beginning. Now this time we need to be on the lookout for what we missed during the first playthrough. The most important clue was Gwendel's parting words of, "Search for the angel." What he is referring to isn't actually too hard to find. At the very start of the game, there is a radio being played. This is the developer welcoming the player to the dream and saying a few things to us. There is one part in particular that really stands out though. That is the part where the rules of the dream are mentioned.
Ignore the animal in the second room. He confuses fiction with reality. There are only 3 doors in the dreamwalk hallway. Do not look for a 4th door. Do not touch any paintings or fragile objects.
The animal in the second room is, of course, Gwendel, and the rule about ignoring what he says can only be referring to his remark about the angel. In the hallway, there is a clear spot for where a 4th door could be. Upon examining this area, we'll enter a white room. Inside, we find a sea angel inside of a bowl. Now we break another rule by destroying the fragile object, setting the angel free. When we return to the hallway, we can see the thing floating off towards the bedroom we start in. It seems to have disappeared, so we'll just ignore it for now. From this point, we can continue to do what we did in the last playthrough, talking to Boris and then completing 2 rounds of puzzles for the other characters. However, once we reach the part where Boris wants us to collect seeds, we now have to do something different. In the first playthrough, everything ended in failure before each character disappeared. The goal this time is to see what happens if we do everything correctly. But to do that, before we go to collect the seeds, we first need to head back to the bedroom. When the sea angel has been released, the painting in the room can now be interacted with. Going through it, we enter a different version of the same room. That's certainly not as bright and colorful as the other. There is a book on the desk here that informs you that you can run by holding down Shift. The moment you think you're safe is the moment he will get you. Well, that sure is a pleasant thing to read. The door on the right here is locked. To get the key, you need to return to the pink version of the room, and take the key you used out of that one. I guess it makes sense that the same key could be used here, but it sure as heck wasn't obvious to me that you could go back and retrieve the key from a door you've already unlocked. Once inside, we're greeted by a very creepy looking hallway. The first thing that should catch your eye is the animals on the couch. A bunny, penguin, and fox. Checking each of these will give you the answers for the final set of puzzles. The bunny has notes on the story. The penguin has the journal with the name we were asked to find, Glenn. And the fox gives you directions to Fox Anne's hiding spot. By checking the far side of the hall, you can also find a mounted boar head, and yet another locked door. There seems to be nothing else we can do in this area, so let's just get out of here. Please don't do that. When passing back through this room again, it flashes dark for just a split second, no doubt catching you off guard when you've just left the black area. And you may have already noticed it, but during this flash, you can see a figure in the window, and the painting of Mary is now looking a bit more disturbing. I've played through this game a lot of times, but it actually wasn't until writing this video that I actually noticed these changes for the first time. My eyes were always focused on Mary, so I guess I just couldn't notice them in time. I thought the room just turned dark and that was it. It honestly kind of freaked me out a little to look over the footage and pause at this moment. Now let's not waste any more time and actually solve those puzzles. This time, Bunilda and Foxanne are nicer to us, and regret that they have to go away. But once again, the most interesting one is Penguendel. Before he vanishes, he says that he knows that Mary will pull through, no matter how frightening things get. Really leaves you wondering just what it is he's really trying to say. It is at this point that the game splits off into the rest of the endings, the first of which I'm going to show is listed as the true ending. Now that we haven't lost any flower petals, we just need to return to Boris, and do what we did last time. However, once we follow him into the door, this happens.
Good girl, sweet girl, you're mine.
From there, the credits start playing again, but there is a slight difference this time. At the end, before we see the words "Goodnight, Mary," we see "the beginning of a nightmare," written rather ominously. Hard to believe that this is the true ending. But either way, we're now given another chance to change our fate. This time, at the end, with all of the flower petals remaining, we're going to say no to Boris, which he really doesn't like to hear. He seems pretty sure that there isn't anything else for us to do in the dream. But that isn't true. There is still one more area that we can go back to. Returning to the black hallway, there is a much more dangerous atmosphere. As soon as you walk in, you'll hear this really freaky music track with all sorts of whispering and crying sounds. And if we run straight forward, this happens. Okay, zero exaggeration, this is one of the most unsettling game overs I have ever seen in a video game. The way its grin just gets slightly wider every time it gets closer, the fact that it doesn't need a loud screamer noise to pack a punch, that haunting image and radio voice at the end. As you make your way through this game, it drops some hints about some pretty dark stuff. And the moment you see this image and hear those words, you know exactly what is implied by this thing catching you. This is how you should do horror. Dreaming Mary doesn't just put you on edge for the sake of cheap scares. It stays subtle the whole time, making you think about what is presented and leading you to imagine the worst case scenario. This is probably the only time that I've seen a scary face used in such a way. There's thought and effort behind its use, so there's actually some substance to it. But of course, this isn't the end yet. The shadow doesn't actually start chasing you until you get near it. What you need to do is carefully go to the 3 animals on the couch. For each one that you didn't lose a flower petal to in the dream world, you will be able to obtain a rusty key. We need all 3 of them for the next part. As soon as we have them, we need to get the heck out of there. Once we're back in the pink area, we're safe. However, the game will no longer let us go through the painting. Next, we need to return to the white room. The painting there will now be glowing. This will put us on the other side of where the shadow originally was. Keep running, and eventually, after going deep within the darkness, Mary will find another door with 3 locks on it. Use those 3 keys and Mary will wake up. This is where things start to become a little bit more clear. Mary is actually named Mari in the real world. She is a girl that is locked inside of her room all day long and passes the time by sleeping. Yeah, if you didn't pick up on it by now, the further you go through this game, the more it is implied that Mari's father is not a very good person to say the least. And in her dreams, he is represented as both Boris and the black shadow that appears when you defy him. Another interesting detail is the stuffed penguin, who Mari mentions was a gift from her uncle Gwendol, pretty much spelling out the fact that Penguendel is a representation of her uncle in her dreams. Sadly, once awake, there just isn't anything you can do, except go back to sleep. This results in another ending, and this time the credit sequence is much more unsettling.
Sunlight, starlight, moonlight, starshine, moonlight.
If you have time, I recommend listening to this track on your own, and paying attention to some of the lyrics. Yet again, the voice calls out saying that Mari shouldn't give up yet. This time, we're going to do everything as we did before, except with one change. When you use the key to unlock the black hallway, you must once again take the key out of the door. This time, when Mari wakes up in the real-world version of the bedroom, she will now somehow have the key in her possession and can use it to leave the room. Like the voice said at the beginning, Mari found the key that turns her dreams into reality. It is also revealed that this helpful voice was Mari's mother all along, who appears to have passed away some time ago. Having achieved the best ending, a special credits animation plays as she wanders out into the world. Towards the end of this credits sequence, the song takes a different tone and poses the question of whether or not Mari is still dreaming. It then ends with a final message of, "Good morning, Mary." And that, ladies and gentlemen, is Dreaming Mary. This is easily one of my favorite indie games I've ever played. It's short, sweet, and stays completely focused on what it's trying to do. It doesn't pad itself out to make the experience seem longer, nor does it throw in cheap jump scares for the sake of garnering more attention. The developer clearly had their own vision for this, and they stayed true to it all the way through. I'm sure that there are many people that think the idea of making something cutesy that turns out to be horrifying is an overdone idea. Because it is. However, with Dreaming Mary, not only is it one of the rare times when the idea is done well, but I also think it offers a unique and interesting take on the idea. You see, Dreaming Mary is only a horror game if you allow it to be. In most horror games, you have no choice but to press on and face whatever the game has in store for you. But in the case of Dreaming Mary, you always have the option to run away. Like I said earlier, this is a game that tries to hold your hand and lead you down a predetermined path. Every time you try to step off of that path, your goal is suddenly not so clear anymore, and the game makes it clear that things are only going to get worse if you keep going this direction. Even when you escape the Black Shadow in the Nightmare area, you still have the option to return to Boris and get the first ending. The game doesn't force its gruesome elements in your face. It challenges you to seek them out and face your fears willingly. Not only is this such a great idea from a gameplay perspective, but it also goes along incredibly well with the game's themes and story. Which brings me to my next point. Another thing I really like about Dreaming Mary is how it handles its subject matter in such a mature way. I find that a lot of people absolutely hate when a dev attempts to include these sort of themes. And with good reason, too. It seems that nowadays, indie devs are too busy praising themselves for how bold they are for tackling a serious subject. As a result of that, their message comes across as shallow and insincere, and the whole thing is just something you'd easily dismiss. But with Dreaming Mary, I'd call it a shining example of how to do it properly. It's an integral part of the game's horror elements and is subtle with many specifics left open to interpretation. This is smartly designed around the concept of exploring something as abstract as dreams. Mari clearly uses her pink world as a means of escapism. She even imagines herself as an entirely different person with another name. But as the dream goes on, reality begins to slip through the cracks, and her perfect world begins to fade away. I mentioned before that when you get a bad ending, the voice will ask if you're satisfied with this fate. Saying no will give you another chance. But if you say yes, the voice will instead say that she'll see you soon. Knowing now that this is actually Mari's deceased mother, that's a pretty heartbreaking thing to read. There is so much more that I want to talk about with this game, and I could honestly go on all day. The amount of polish and attention to detail here is insane, and it feels like every tiny thing has some significance worth discussing. But I think that this has gone on long enough, so let's just wrap it up here. My name is Pikasprey, and thanks for watching.